for those of you who are interested in events that are going on around the world, like myself, I try and keep myself abreast of what's going on around the world, whether it's politically or in religious circles, and basically, a good Christian is someone who's well-rounded, and I'm not talking about physically. I'm talking about someone who knows and understands. No, I wouldn't say. I was about to use the word everything. No one knows everything. Only God knows everything. But a good Christian is someone who whether you're male or female. Okay, it doesn't matter. You should understand spiritual things, and you should also understand the things of the world. Those are the two main important things. I actually said to my daughter one time, who's doing A levels right now. She's actually finishing A levels this year. I think she's writing her final exams in October, and some of them in November this year, 2025. That all subjects can be grouped into two categories. It's spiritual things, in other words, the plan of salvation and how the world works. So, but when you then break those two subjects down, you find that there's science involved, there's geography, there's history, there's politics, and many other subjects. And when you are trying to learn all those subjects or issues, trying to understand current affairs, you find that there's always deception. There's always one side which is true and one side which is false. So, for instance, with the scamdemic, there was a side that was true and then there was a side that was false. My belief is that there was actually nothing, because the whole thing was a psychological operation, which was headed by the Department of Defense in the US. Okay, but that's not what I'm talking about. I just wanted to say that you need to understand those two things: the plan of salvation and how the world really works. That's why I did those videos. I think I did 14 parts, covering religion, banking, corporations, politics, secret societies, the United Nations, the media. I think there were 14 parts, if I remember correctly, 14 or 15, somewhere there. So you can go and watch those when you have time. But in this video, I wanted to talk about, or to address, the issue of what I call the unholy office of Inquisition. So the question, it's in the form of a question: what happened to the unholy office of Inquisition, and who is behind persecution today? So I started this video by saying, for those of you who like to keep abreast of what's going on around the world, you may have, and this has been going on for a long time, you may know that there are Christians who are being persecuted in various parts of the world. Because remember, there's a spiritual war as well as a physical war. So I'll mention some of the countries where persecution is happening a lot more than it's happening in other countries. So there's Nigeria straight away, and we know that Nigeria is kind of split. It's mainly two religions, and I'm not saying they're the only ones there, but the two main religions there are Christianity and Islam. So there are Christians who are being persecuted in Nigeria, and then another country where Christians are being persecuted is China. Yes, there are Christian churches there, but it's like they can't really worship freely. Normally they have government agents inside the churches, and the church members actually know this, so they're very careful about what they say. And sometimes the government will actually tell these various Christian groups what they can and cannot say, what can be preached from the pulpit in those churches. I also understand that there are underground Christian churches in China as well. So another country as well where Christians are being persecuted is I know that in Russia recently, I think maybe 3-4 years ago, they introduced a law that said that basically restricted the ability of Christians to witness to others, like especially going door to door and stuff like that. This also affects the Jehovah's Witnesses, who I've made a video about them saying that they have a lot of false doctrines. But yeah, I don't believe that anyone's freedom of religion should be curtailed just because they have a wrong belief. Everyone should choose what religion they want to be part of. Some of them, their eyes will be opened and then they'll leave those religions anyway. It's not up to anyone to try and stop someone from practicing their religion freely. So where else? North Korea as well, Christians are persecuted there, and obviously Koreans in general, their freedoms are being suppressed by the government there. I already mentioned China, and then in Europe in general, Christians also are not being allowed to practice their religion freely in terms of preaching on the street. But in Europe in general, but especially or specifically in the UK, Christians are being persecuted when they preach on the street, because those who are anti-Christian, it's especially those who are from the alphabet community, or those who support the alphabet community will normally call the police and say this person made or this person is being homophobic, or they made homophobic comments when the person who is preaching, it's normally street preachers who are having the police called on them based on the allegation that they've made homophobic comments when they actually haven't. And sometimes what they're doing is reading from God's word, which in a way is actually making God's word illegal, because anyone who wants to should be free to read from God's word in public without being without having the police being called on them. So and to a certain extent, even in America as well, Christians, even though they say Americans have a First Amendment right, and the First Amendment is to do with free speech, okay, which includes the right to burn the American flag, which now Trump is saying is going to make that illegal. All this is to do with people in general, and also Christians having their God-given rights being stripped from them. Okay, let's not be asleep to this agenda. We're moving into a new world order, and in fact, some say that the new world order is here already. But the more as time goes by, we'll see more and more that there are going to be restrictions that are placed on us as human beings here on this earth, and there's always an excuse for it. And one of the excuses is because of climate change, because of hate speech. We're trying to stop hate speech. Oh, and then they'll say, oh, look now, Charlie Kirk got assassinated because of someone having an extreme ideology, which is all false. And I'll address the Charlie Kirk assassination in a separate video. Okay. So here, let me just start by reading what I've got in front of me here. So I'm addressing there are like two questions basically. What happened to the unholy office of Inquisition, and who is behind persecution today? Because remember, the holy office, they said the unholy office of Inquisition doesn't exist anymore. So who is behind the persecution then? Because prior to the unholy office being disbanded, it was the Catholic Church that was persecuting Christians. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to answer in this video. Revelation 2 verse 8 says, "And unto the angel of the church in Smyrna write, these things saith the first and the last, which was dead and is alive." Obviously that's Jesus. "I know thy works and tribulation and poverty, but thou art rich. And I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan." Going on to verse 10, "Fear none of those things which thou shalt suffer. Behold, the devil shall cast some of you into prison, that ye may be tried, and ye shall have tribulation 10 days. Be thou faithful unto death, and I'll give thee a crown of life. I thought these were good verses to start with, because it's talking about persecution, basically, where Christians, Jesus was prophesying that Christians were going to be thrown into prison, and he says for 10 days. Now we know that in prophecy, a day is equals to a year. Okay, so here when he talks about Christians being thrown into prison and going into tribulation for 10 days, it's actually 10 years. And we know that this has actually already happened. It happened to the early Christian church, where an emperor called Diocletian, and an easy way to remember his name is Diocletian, Die meaning that he persecuted Christians, okay? Although it's spelled D-I-O, Cletian. He persecuted Christians for 10 years, okay? So in 438 AD, Emperor Justinian declared the Bishop of Rome. The Emperor Justinian was the emperor of pagan Rome. Okay, he declared the Bishop of Rome, the Pope, to be the head of all churches worldwide, with the power and authority to punish heretics. Now, heretics are the Catholic Church will say heretics are those who don't basically follow what the teachings of the Catholic Church, but actually, in the true sense, the heretic is someone who disagrees with the Pope, or disagrees or only believes what the Bible says. So like Protestants, like with me, they'll say I'm a heretic, okay? So the Catholic Church began to persecute God's saints under the guise that they were heretics or witches or wizards. This period of Earth's history was termed the Dark Ages, and it lasted from 438 AD to 1798, when the Pope was arrested by Napoleon Bonaparte's general, and the general's name was Berthier. It is estimated that between 50 to 150 million Christians were killed during this period, including the Saint Bartholomew massacre in France, where up to 70,000 Huguenot Christians, these were Protestants, they were murdered in 1572. This was done at the instigation of the Jesuits. Okay. So when the Catholic Church was firmly established, the popes of Rome set their eyes on Jerusalem. And this is going back now. This part that I'm reading here is basically going the historic period is the 600s. Okay, the 600s. Said the popes of Rome set their eyes on Jerusalem, the jewel of the Middle East, the city of peace, considered to be of historic and religious and geographic importance, would be of immense value in the hands of the papacy. The Catholic Church wanted Jerusalem for herself, but the means and the manpower were lacking. According to an ex-Jesuit priest by the name of Alberto Rivera, the Vatican devised a plan to conquer Jerusalem and to make it a Roman Catholic city by using the children of Ishmael, the Arabs, to fight their proxy war. Through information obtained in secret briefings with Cardinal Bay, Rivera, that ex-Jesuit, learned that the Vatican sent a wealthy Arab nun named Khadija to search for a man who could become the prophet to the Arabs. So Khadija found Muhammad, and the two of them got married. The prophet, in quotes, the prophet being 25 and his wife being 40 years of age. With secret orders from the Vatican, Muhammad started a new religion called Islam. Before the new religion was created, their God had been called Allah, and after the new religion, he was still called Allah. The only difference was that Muhammad's God had become monotheistic rather than polytheistic. It was Catholicism for the Arabs, and the children of Ishmael fully embraced it, falling for the papacy's cleverly devised plan. By the time Muhammad died in 632 AD, Islam was expanding rapidly. It was now time to put the secret plan into action. The Vatican financed the building of Islamic armies, but in return they asked for the Muslim armies to conquer Jerusalem on their behalf and then hand it over to the Pope. This being agreed, the Islamic armies invaded and conquered Jerusalem in April 637. Having conquered Jerusalem on the Pope's behalf, they were now requested to hand over the prized city to the Pope. The Pope's plan backfired. Realizing how much power they had, the Mohammedans, the Muslims, refused to hand over Jerusalem. The Pope was infuriated. He began to assemble an army made up of Roman Catholic believers to take Jerusalem from the Muslims. This led to what were called the Crusades. These were wars that were fought by Muslims and Roman Catholics for control of Jerusalem. So, I'm just giving you a bit of history so you understand where all this persecution and all the wars, who instigates wars here on this earth. I've already done a video talking about how, why there will never be peace here on this earth. So if we just jump forward a bit in history, we come to the era of the Protestant Reformation. Now it's incorrect. It's incorrectly said, and this is even taught in schools, and it's even in the history books. It's incorrectly said that the Protestant Reformation was started by a Catholic monk named Martin Luther. Now, I'm not saying that Martin Luther wasn't involved in the Reformation. What I'm saying is, he didn't start the Reformation. The Reformation was started by the Waldenses, a group of Christians from France and Italy, some of whom kept the Sabbath, by the way. When by the Sabbath, I'm referring to the seventh-day Sabbath, Saturday. Okay, not Sunday, not this false Sabbath on Sunday. They were persecuted by the Catholic Church. Why? Because the Catholic Church wants everyone to bow the knee. It wants all religions, all churches around the world to bow the knee. Just like Justinian had said that the Pope is the head of all churches around the world. They want everyone to bow the knee and acknowledge the Pope as the head of all churches. And for those who refuse, especially those who keep the Sabbath and don't keep Sunday, which is even the Catholic Church says that Sunday is her mark of authority. Christian churches that don't keep Sunday tend to be persecuted. Okay, so the Waldenses were persecuted, but I'm talking about the Waldenses because they were the first ones. They were actually the ones who started the Reformation by copying, by basically copying the Holy Scriptures and memorizing even whole chapters of Scripture, which they then shared with those in their communities, and they even used to. They actually lived. They were known as the Israel of the Alps. Okay, they actually left the cities and stuff and went in towns, cities and towns, and went and lived in isolated places. But from there they would go to towns and cities and share the gospel. And they normally used to have these hand copied portions of scripture hidden in their clothing in case they got stopped and searched. Okay, so these are the ones who started the Reformation, and I believe I've read this in some history books that they were actually involved in the translation of the Geneva Bible because they had accurate manuscripts of God's word, not the manuscripts that were used to translate these modern Bible versions. Okay, yeah. So yes, then Martin Luther actually basically poured fuel. He poured petrol on the fire, if I can call it that, of the Reformation. And there were other characters actually even before Martin Luther, such as John Wycliffe, the English reformer, who he and his lollards, his disciples, also translated God's word, but they translated it from the Latin Vulgate, which had many errors. But he also did his part. And then one of my favorite reformer is William Tyndale, who was also an English reformer who could speak 8 languages fluently. Most of the Geneva Bible and even the King James is based on his work. Okay, who else? There was also John Huss from Bohemia, today's Czech Republic. He was from around that area. He was then burnt on the stake, and his friend also Jerome as well was also caught and burnt on the stake. There were many reformers. There was also John Knox from Scotland, and John Calvin as well. And it's not to say that the reformers were perfect, but they basically exposed the false teachings of the Catholic Church. So because of the Protestant Reformation, the Protestant Reformation, which nearly destroyed the Catholic Church, because of this, there was, this led to the creation of the Society of Jesus in 1540. Let me just try and remember what their name is in Latin. It's Regimini Militantis Ecclesia, something like that. It's a regiment, basically. It's a ecclesia obviously means church, but or something to do with religion. They're like warrior monks. Okay, the Jesuits are. They've been called many things. Okay, they've been called sorcerers and assassins and monks, warrior monks, and the Jesuits, by the way. And I'll keep saying this is when I get the opportunity. The Knights Templar, who were abolished by Philip IV of France and Clement IV, I think, who was a pope at the time. They went underground, basically resurfaced as the Illuminati, and then later on became the Jesuits. Okay, so the Knights Templar are the Jesuits, and the Jesuits are the Knights Templar. It's the same thing, and they are also in charge of Freemasonry. All secret societies are controlled by the Jesuits. So, yeah, so the Protestant Reformation led to the creation of the Society of Jesus in 1540, and the Society of Jesus are in charge of what is known as the Counter-Reformation. There was a meeting which took place for 18 years with breaks obviously in between. This was called the Council of Trent. The Council of Trent happened between 1545 and 1563, and then after the Jesuits were created, they came up with a what's known as the Jesuit Oath. Now I won't read through that, but you can find it on the internet if you just type in the Jesuit Oath. Maybe some slight differences depending on which website you go to, but and I know that the Jesuits will deny this and say it's not true, but of course that's one of their there are things that when they're exposed, they deny and say whatever is being said about them is not true. For instance, they denied that Alberto Rivera, that ex-Jesuit that I spoke about, they deny that he was a part of the Jesuits. Okay, he was definitely a Jesuit. It's only because he exposed them, and he actually got poisoned. That's how he died. So just a summary of the Jesuit Oath, because here we're talking about persecution and how persecution is being done by the Catholic Church clandestinely. Okay, they are hiding whilst getting various organizations to persecute Christians, which is what I'm going to talk about in the coming few minutes. So some of the things they say in the Jesuit Oath is that they will rip the stomachs of pregnant women and bash the heads of the infants against rocks and things like that. That they will waste, boil, flay these infamous heretics, talking about Protestants and those who disagree with the Pope and with the Catholic Church, that they'll use the poisoned cup, they'll use the leaden bullet and the strangulation cord. Some of these things have actually been used even recently. Charlie Kirk was assassinated with a leaden bullet. So and they say things like they say in their oath that a Jesuit will pretend to be a Protestant, whether so that he can enter or become part of, let's say, the Anglican Church, the SDA Church, the Presbyterian Church, the Lutherans, and then after that he'll basically climb the ladder, so to speak, and take a prominent position in these organizations, so that basically they can steer these Protestant churches back to what they call, in quotes, Mother Church. Okay, so that's really what's going on. But on top of that, they also persecute Christians as well. So I'm just going to read a bit about the Unholy Office of Inquisition. It says here, in 1184, Pope Lucius III required bishops to make a judicial inquiry or inquisition for heresy in their diocese, a provision renewed by the Fourth Lateran Council in 1215. Episcopal inquisitions, however, proved ineffective because of the regional nature of the bishop's power, and because not all bishops introduced inquisitions in their diocese, the papacy gradually assumed authority over the process, though bishops never lost the right to lead inquisitions. In 1227, Pope Gregory the Ninth appointed the first judges delegate as inquisitors for heretical depravity. Many, though not all, of whom were Dominican and Franciscan friars. Basically, this is saying that Dominicans and Franciscans were given the role of being inquisitors. Okay, papal inquisitors had authority over everyone except bishops and their officials. There was no central authority to coordinate their activities, but after 1248 or 1249, when the first handbook of inquisitorial practice was written, inquisitors adopted common procedures such as torture. That's something that's quite important to understand about the Inquisitions, is that they actually used torture. Now, which part of that is Christian or Christ-like? John the Baptist said, "Do harm to no man." Okay, in 1252, Pope Innocent IV licensed inquisitors to allow obdurate heretics to be tortured by lay henchmen. It is difficult to determine how common this practice was in the 13th century, but the Inquisition certainly acquiesced in the use of torture. To acquiesce is to go along with something. Okay, in the trial of the Knights Templar, a military religious order in 1308, basically saying that the Knights Templar were tortured basically in 1308. 1307. Persecution by the Inquisition also contributed to the collapse of Catharism, a dualist heresy that had great influence in southern France and northern Italy by about 1325. Okay, so this article is saying that the Catharism was a heresy. Okay, those are there, was not mine. Although established to defeat that heresy, the Inquisition was assisted by the pastoral work of the mendicant orders in its triumph over the Cathars. The Inquisition declined in importance in the late Middle Ages, though it continued to try cases of heresy. For instance, the Waldenses, who I've mentioned, the spiritual Franciscans, and the alleged heresy of the Free Spirit and supposed sect of mystics who advocated antinomianism and cases of sorcery. The most vigorous dissenting movements of the 15th century, Lollardy, they're talking about the John Wycliffe and his followers in England, and the Hussitism, those who followed the teachings of John Huss in Bohemia, were not subject to its jurisdiction. The earliest, largest, and best known of these was the Spanish Inquisition. That's the one that most people know about. There was a time when I asked. I was doing a presentation. I was still in the corporate SDA church at the time. I was doing a presentation, and it was on the Inquisition. And I asked the members of the church if any of them knew about the Inquisition, and I think someone spoke up and said, "Are you talking about the Spanish Inquisition?" That seems to be the one that most, especially Christians, know about. But yeah, there was more to the Inquisition than just the Spanish Inquisition. And in fact, the Inquisition is still going on today, which is what I'm going to prove to you in this video. Spanish Inquisition, it says here, established by Pope Sixtus IV at the petition of Ferdinand and Isabella, the rulers of Aragon and Castile, in a papal bull of November 1, 1478. It was eventually extended throughout the Spanish Empire, in Europe and the Americas, through a system of subordinate regional tribunals. It was formally abolished by the Spanish government in 1834. So now here we start to see the Inquisition. in different parts of the world being abolished. Okay, so that one was in 1834. Later, institutional inquisition were established in Portugal in 1540, which was then abolished in 1821, and in Rome for the Papal States and some other parts of Italy in 1542. The latter was erected into the Congregation of the Holy Roman and Universal Inquisition, a holy office, one of the 15 secretariats into which the administrative reforms of Sixtus V, 1585 to 90, divided papal government. In 1965, the Holy Office was reorganized. Listen to this. The so-called Holy Office, which I call the Unholy Office of Inquisition, was reorganized by Pope Paul VI and renamed the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. The boast of Rome is that she never changes, though. So just because the Unholy Office of Inquisition was abolished or done away with, does not. Remember, the Catholic Church says that she never changes. So although the name may have changed, the tactics are the same behind the scenes, okay? Which is why we need to keep our eyes open. Don't take things on face value. The Roman Church, this is a quote from The Great Controversy by Ellen G. White, pages 565 to 566. The Roman Church is far-reaching in her plans and modes of operation. She's employing every device to extend her influence and increase her power in preparation for a fierce and determined conflict to regain control of the world. So now, what I'm going to read next are the three aims of the Catholic Church, okay? To re-establish persecution, to undo all that Protestantism has done, and I've already to gain control of the world. I already read that, okay? To gain control of the world, to re-establish persecution, and to undo all that Protestantism has done. So everything that Protestantism has brought about on this earth, things like freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, freedom to congregate, freedom to travel, freedom of religion, even the right to bear arms and things like that, all those things that they are planning to do away with all that. So that in terms of the right to bear arms, which Americans have through their constitution, which is the Second Amendment, there is a plan, there's an agenda to remove all that. That's what some of these school shootings are about. Some of them real, and someone keeps texting me. Some of these shootings are real and some of them are not, okay? Don't believe everything you see on TV. That's why I don't watch TV, because TV is propaganda. And then here, same book, Great Controversy, page 236. To give them, the Jesuits, greater power, a bull was issued re-establishing the Inquisition. Such were the means which Rome had invoked to quench the light of the Reformation, to withdraw from men the Bible. And in the past, during the Dark Ages, they used to seize Bibles by force from those who had them. But nowadays, what they do. So I was just explaining how during the Dark Ages, the Catholic Church used to use force to seize Bibles from Christians. But nowadays, what they do is, because it's not politically correct to do that, is they don't do it like that. They do it by they did it, and they are doing it by through the Big Bang Theory, which is false science, which was created by a Jesuit priest named George Lemaitre, and also through Darwinian evolution, which is false science as well, through many other means. There's also what's called oh, sorry, I forgot what it's called now. It's in F. Tapasos's book, Learning Against Learning, I think. Yeah, Learning Against Learning, where they took the very instruments of the Protestant Reformation, such as printing, and they used printing to destroy the Protestant Reformation. So through magazines, through false education, the textbooks that have got a lot of false information in them, and through pornography. And nowadays we have OnlyFans and things like that, and all this, the technologies and the means that were used to help in the progress of Protestantism, they are using they are using in the counter Reformation, in their fight against the Reformation. So let me just try and carry on here and finish this. The Archbishop of St. Louis once said, "Heresy and unbelief are crimes, and in Christian countries, as in Italy and Spain, for instance, where all the people are Catholics, and where the Catholic religion is an essential part of the law of the land, they are punished as other crimes. Every cardinal, archbishop, and bishop in the Catholic Church takes an oath of allegiance to the Pope, in which occur the following words: heretics, schismatics, and rebels to our said Lord the Pope, or his aforesaid successors, I will to my utmost persecute and oppose." This is taken from the Great Controversy. Okay. The Catholic Church, this is me speaking now, the Catholic Church works through numerous organizations and think tanks. The reason why it's like an onion. Basically, it has many layers. In order to get to the core, you need to peel back those many layers. So that the Catholic Church is hiding behind many organizations, so that it is not obvious that it's them who are doing all these things. For instance, in this particular case, persecution of Christians and those of different religions. So some of these secretive organizations and think tanks are the CIA, not necessarily a think tank, but it's an organization that is used by the Catholic Church to further the agenda of the Catholic Church taking over the whole world, where a thing that we know as the New World Order. So the CIA is an offshoot of the Jesuits. The CIA sometimes also known as Catholics in Action, and some jokingly call it cocaine import agency. The CIA are the biggest drug dealers in the world. Okay, there's the CFR, Chatham House, Freemasons, Knights of Malta, Knights of Columbus, Knights Templar, who still exist, but not perhaps in the same way that they did in the Dark Ages. Because in the Dark Ages, they protected the interests of the Catholic Church by protecting those who were making a pilgrim to Jerusalem, so that they wouldn't get attacked by the Muslims on the way there and get attacked and robbed by the Muslims. There's the WEF, there's NATO, Opus Dei, and then in terms, the CIA does work for the Church of Rome in terms of persecution, because remember there's what they call the war on terror, which I call the war of terror. The CIA is heavily involved in that. Some of the bombings that are done with drones and stuff, it's the CIA that does that. Okay, but over the past few decades, we've seen the rise of terrorist organizations, in the Islamic terrorist organizations, such as Al Qaeda, Al Nusra Front, Boko Haram, and others, which were created by the CIA and Mossad. Have you not noticed that these so-called terrorist organizations don't attack Israel? Israel, basically, for those maybe who are, there is a theory that's, on a lot of people who think they are awake to what's going on. They believe that it's the Jews that are running the world. It's not the Jews. The Jews basically are working with the papacy, okay, and they're working for the papacy. Remember that the Rothschilds are keepers of the Vatican treasury, according to F. Tapasos in his book Rulers of Evil, and also in the Encyclopedia Britannica it says that they are keepers or guardians of the Vatican treasury. So these European Jews are working for the papacy, okay. So what I wanted to explain about the modern day nation of Israel is actually an extension of the U.S. government. Have you not seen how they get basically billions of dollars every year, and they get a lot of ammunition and weaponry to so-called fight their enemies? But the Israel is the one attacking its Arab neighbors. Okay, even this genocide that's going on in Palestine it's basically they're conducting ethnic cleansing to remove the Palestinians from their own land so that they can take it over. In this case, specifically the Gaza Strip. what's next for the West Bank, because the West Bank is kind of like it's under the control of the Palestinians as well. So I believe that after the West Bank, they'll probably attack the Palestinians, the West Bank as well, and accuse them of committing some kind of attack against them. But yeah, Israel, or Israel, or something like you call it, is basically attacking its neighbors, because there's what's called the Greater Israel Plan, where they want to occupy territories in some of their neighboring countries. There's a map of that on the internet. If you look that up, the Greater Israel Plan, you can see that. So a lot of these terrorist organizations, Boko Haram and the others I've mentioned, they were created by the CIA and Mossad. Okay, even the War of Terror, which started after 9/11, was and is part of Rome's Office of Inquisition. 9/11 was an inside job carried out by the CIA, FBI, and Mossad, and was used as a pretext to invade other countries, especially other countries that were not bowing the knee to the papacy. So the USA is the military arm of the three city-states. So you have the three city-states are the Vatican. It's a state within a state. And then we have the City of London, not to be confused with Greater London, okay? The City of London is a small state with its own flag and post office and mail service, and its own mayor. And also have Washington D.C. Washington D.C. Or let's say America is the military arm. So these are the two I've mentioned. The Vatican controls religion. City of London controls banking. It's thought by some that America is the one that controls banking because of the US dollar. No. The Federal Reserve, which is not a government agency, is a private bank owned by the Rothschilds and the Morgans and the Rockefellers and the Warburgs. Those are the families that started and they own majority shares in that private bank. Was basically started by the Rothschilds, okay, meaning by the Rothschilds, and those are the families I've mentioned. So it's not a US bank, and even they use Latin. On the banknotes they have Latin because that's the official language of the Catholic Church. Okay, so this military arm, this what's called what President Eisenhower referred to as the military-industrial complex is basically the U.S. military who are being used by the Jesuits specifically and the Catholic Church to fight wars on the behalf of the Catholic Church. They're the ones who are raising up or creating these terrorist organizations to fight against Christians. So don't be fooled. Boko Haram and these Muslim terrorist organizations, even the ones that are attacking Burkina Faso, because Burkina Faso is not playing ball. They are separating themselves from, or they don't want to be a colony of the French anymore. These terrorists are being sent there to destabilize and potentially, even if they can, assassinate Ibrahim Traore, who's the president at the time, because he's basically detached Burkina Faso from being a colony of the French government. So personally, I believe that all African countries and even some third world countries which were colonized in the past, that they are still colonies of those European countries. It's basically they use what's the expression? Smoke and mirrors, or smoke screens. To deceive us into thinking that African countries are independent and all this stuff and we're free, but it's not true. It's like basically Africa is being raped by Western countries in the same way that they were being raped during colonial times. So let me just finish this by saying that there's this Vatican bishop named Bishop Sorondo, who said that China is the best implementer of Catholic social doctrine. Now, if you don't understand what that means, think back to what happened during the scamdemic, what happened in China during the scamdemic, how the Chinese were actually forced into taking the poke and adhering to certain mandates and stuff like that, and how they're putting cameras everywhere in China, and you have to use there's an app called WeChat, I think. Is it WeChat? I think That's the one they use in China, that you use that for buying and selling. So the Chinese are under a lot of control. If you say anything against the Chinese government, against the what's it called? Is it CCP? Chinese Communist Party, yeah, CCP. They can arrest you, and you can be stopped from traveling, and you can be stopped from buying food and all this stuff. And there are many Chinese people who are in open air prisons in China for not following what they are being told to do. Just end with Revelation 18:24, which says, "And in her," speaking of Babylon the Great, no, spiritual Babylon, not to be confused with geographic Babylon. So this is talking about the Catholic Church. It says, "And in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all that were slain upon the earth." Okay, so the main purpose of me doing all this rather long video is to explain that all the suffering that's going on around the world, and even there are videos of even more recently, it's been Americans making a lot of videos saying that they are struggling financially, and those who are, let's say, don't have any children, they actually say, for those who are married and have children, how do you actually manage? Because for some of us who don't have children, who are just cohabiting, we can't manage. How do you do it? And recently, I saw a video of this American woman who was literally making a video, and she was crying, and she said she went to I think they call them food banks. I mean, you know the place where you go and get free food and stuff. She went there trying to get free food, and they turned her away. She was basically struggling, and there are many, I think in the millions of Americans who are struggling financially, and this applies to Canadians as well. So I'm saying all this, even the economic sufferings that people are going through, even in the UK, there are lots of people who are struggling financially. All that is being done purposely. In the same way that a persecution of Christians by these terrorist organizations in Nigeria and in Burkina Faso and other parts of the world. Even recently, the government of Syria, which was headed by Bashar al-Assad, was removed, and you have this jihadist government that took over there. All those were basically had their were created, not only created, but they were funded and supported by the Americans and the Israelis. Because what's interesting is that when this jihadist government, before the Assad government was removed, America had placed sanctions on Syria. But when Assad was removed, even right now when Trump won the elections again, when he became president the second time, he then removed the sanctions from Syria, meaning that basically they support the jihadist government. And the so-called president there in Syria used to wear military attire, but now he's changed and he's now wearing a suit and tie, as if to say he's trying to put on a different image, basically. So yeah. So I just wanted to explain who is behind all the suffering of Christians and the persecution of Christians, and even other religions as well. For instance, in Palestine there are Christians as well who are also being genocided, but most of them are Muslims, from my understanding. So don't forget that Islam is also targeted as well, because they rebelled against the Catholic Church when they were supposed to hand over Jerusalem to the Pope, or to the Catholic Church. So maybe that will help you to get a better understanding of why there's so much suffering around the world. But don't be fooled. The office of Inquisition actually still exists. They changed the name. It's like taking a can of Coca-Cola and putting a different label on it. The contents are still the same. Okay, so don't be fooled by that. I hope this was helpful to you in understanding what's happening around the world. Because, like I said before, at the beginning of the video, you need to understand the plan of salvation and also understand how things work in the world. So I'll see you on the next video.